Coming up, a Dakota artist creates a virtual art installation. Plus, we look at a first in the Pacific Northwest. The Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission is now being led by a female. We'll learn more about her. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian Country today.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. Working with award-winning professors, Cronkite students learn news reporting, social media, shooting and editing videos, and producing content for communications industries. Cronkite's 15 professional programs give students the opportunity to cover critical issues throughout the U.S. and beyond. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Ku'watsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has launched a new website aimed at solving cases of missing and murdered Indigenous people in the U.S. The agency rolled out the first of its kind website on Friday. The new platform includes details of missing persons and homicide victims whose cases have not been solved. One of the missing persons featured is Arden Peppian. According to the website, she was last seen on the Blackfeet Reservation in April. She went missing at age 3 and has since turned 4. Arden was last seen wearing a purple jacket with a unicorn design on the front, a gray sweater, and black leggings. Her case is open, and those with information are able to submit tips through the website. A tribe in Northern California is celebrating a victory of putting land into trust. 283 acres is now back in the hands of the Piconee Rancheria of Chukchansi Indians. The tribe is located 56 miles north of Fresno, California. In a move last week, the Interior Department announced the land transfer. Claudia Gonzalez is the chairwoman of the tribe, and she says this is an exercise of the tribe's sovereignty. She praised the tribal council and staff for the hard work it took to make this happen. Big plans for the new tribal land include building housing for citizens and some businesses for the tribe. In North Dakota, 6 sites using an indigenous slur are set to be renamed. This is part of the U.S. Department of Interior's effort to remove the racist and sexist S word from places under the federal government's jurisdiction. Secretary Deb Haaland's order also directs a task force to create a list of potential new names for the sites. Prairie Rose Seminole is the National Parks Conservation Association's first ever Indigenous Fellow, and she hopes Native people will have a hand in renaming these sites.
I hope that the task forces that are created to rename those spaces include the Indigenous voices from those spaces. That's key in this engagement process to not only just reclaim but rename those spaces. Is medicine. It's healing for our people and for our land.
According to the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, the renaming process will affect more than 660 sites nationwide. In Arizona, the Gila River Indian community is taking steps to complete a much-needed irrigation project. On Friday, the nation signed a $72 million annual funding agreement with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. According to the nation, this funding was made possible through President Joe Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law that was signed in November. Gila River President Stephen Roe Lewis thanked the Democratic and Republican members of Congress from Arizona for their work in getting the bill passed. He said the funding will ultimately accelerate an irrigation project that is needed to complete their water settlement plans. Governor Lewis said with the new money, the community can now enter into construction contracts this year. He added that this move will also create new jobs that benefit the Arizona economy. Money to collect on Navajo. The Navajo Nation is reporting 7,500 checks that have been unclaimed by its citizens. In July, the nation approved the final phase of the CARES Act hardship program to allow remaining applicants to receive relief funding. Over $361 million of that money was approved and made available to Navajo people to apply for. And as of last week, 312,000 citizens have received assistance. Those who applied for the hardship assistance and have not received a check have until December 23rd to pick them up. An Indigenous model will soon grace the pages of a popular magazine. 19-year-old Quanah Chasing Horse will be featured in a January issue of Elle magazine. Chasing Horse made history in October when she became the first Indigenous woman to walk in a show for luxury fashion brand Chanel. Her feature in Elle includes a news article and a photo shoot. In her interview, she highlighted her life's goal, which is to uplift Indigenous people in mainstream media. And those are the headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Coming up, artist Marlena Miles tells us about her new art exhibit using AR. Plus, a fish commission in the Pacific Northwest is being led by a female. We'll see what her goals are to save the salmon. St. Paul, Minnesota is the home of a new piece of public artwork. It is called Dakota Spirit Walk and is located near the Mississippi River. It is not your usual sculpture. Instead, it is an app-based augmented reality creation that uses geolocation, 3D animation, and audio to guide users along a nature path. Marlena Miles is the creative behind this, and she joins us now. Hi, Marlena.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Describe this project for people who've never seen it before.
Well, I think a lot of young people might be familiar with the technology. It's sort of similar to Pokemon Go. So you're looking through the app, through your phone, through the camera lens, and it places these 2D and these three-dimensional artworks at the GPS-based locations. And so when people travel along the Dakota Spirit Walk, they will meet these spirits and they'll tell them a story. They'll teach them about the history of the land. So it's sort of using the technology that kids are used to now to teach ancient stories.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, essentially it would be someone pointing their phone on this path that they're walking through. And as you mentioned, they would see these spirits along the sides of the path.
Yeah. So when they open the app, there's a map and it leads them along to where they need to go. And when they get close, there's a little icon that they hit and it hits like open art experience. And then it activates the augmented reality story at that exact location.
Where did this idea start for you?
It started a few years ago. I started seeing augmented reality installations in museums. But it took a few years for technology, I think, to get to the point where it's accessible on many people's phones. And I like the idea of being able to put our stories at the exact locations that they take place. That way, people understand that our histories and our significance to the land is actually still alive and vibrant. And it just takes maybe seeing it through a native lens to really understand those stories.
And tell us about the spirits that people encounter when they're on this walk. How did you get the idea for those?
Yeah, well, Dakota people, we have a creation story. So I took up four of the spirits. I took Grandmother Earth, Grandfather Stone, the Thunder Being, and the Water Serpent, and I placed them along the path just to teach sort of the different ways that human beings need to live in harmony with nature, because that area, it was a sacred site. It was also the home of our villages, but it was destroyed during the industrial age of the Twin Cities, and now it's being restored to its natural state. So it's kind of letting people understand that, the past is significant. And even though certain things might have happened, like destroying those sites, we now have the ability to restore some of that.
Do you have a personal favorite spirit, and what is the message that they might be sharing?
My personal favorite is the Thunder Being because they teach us about balance, but they also connect us to our ancestor. The thunder is like the connection between the sky and the earth, and the sky, the star world is where our ancestors are, and it's also where we come from when we come to this planet. So it's my favorite. And when you go to that site, there are burial mounds at that park. So it teaches people to respect the burial mounds and also, listen to their ancestors and take what they've learned from the Dakota Spirit Walk into the rest of their daily lives.
And how long is this path that people walk on?
I'd say it's probably about maybe almost a mile, but it also loops around, and it's a very sort of a big park that people can explore too. And then look at the other sort of restorations that are happening, like native plantings and such.
And since this project was unveiled, what has been the reaction?
A lot of people, they have never been to that area. Some people haven't, and other people who have, it shows them a deeper meaning of, reading history books or reading, like there are some panels that talk about the village site there, but to actually see like vibrant art and to hear native people speaking and through the app, I think it brings like a new sort of life to that area and to those stories that are still there.
And I could understand that this is probably really meaningful for non native people who, as you said, might be encountering this for the first time. But in the same token, I think it is probably also really meaningful for native people to walk along the ancestral path that their ancestors did.
Yeah, like my seven-time great grandfather, that's his village site. So it also connects me as an artist to that area. And this history isn't that long ago. And I think, once people start learning more about it, they see the connections between that location and the other areas in the Twin Cities.
What did it feel like to work on a project like this, given it sounds like your very personal connection to the place?
It sort of feels like a complete circle now that I was able, to help open people's eyes to Dakota history and through art forms and technology that I personally enjoy. I know some people, they teach about the culture through traditional means, through song, through dance. And, I like to be able to show that as Native people, we're innovative still and we can adapt any new piece of technology into our culture to share it.
Can you talk about sort of the rollout of this project? I think given the fact that we're still in a pandemic and that a lot of people, walk around outside, it's a safe place to sort of get out and move your body. How much of a factor did the pandemic play in this art installation?
The pandemic played a big role because I worked with Pixel Farm and Todd Boss as sort of helping create the app and put the word out there that we're creating this. And but we all met through Zoom meetings, and we wanted to create like a really safe place that people go to, and that couldn't happen really indoors. And so also during the pandemic, I think a lot of people have started to reconnect with nature, with the natural world. And so, this helps people, I think, understand more about like the peaceful feelings they may find or how they can learn more about indigenous cultures as they're exploring, the natural sites here in Minnesota.
This idea of using AR to tell stories and to make art is something that we're seeing more and more. This is the first time that I've personally heard of it used in a native context, but I'd love to ask you if you know of any other examples using things like AR to tell stories.
I believe there is a little bit happening in Los Angeles with Native groups there too, but as Native people, we don't often have access to our sacred sites anymore, or we don't legally own the land there for certain reasons. But I think augmented reality lets us, put our stories, put our art, put our cultures back at these sites without anyone being able to complain necessarily that, we're somehow um, disturbing their space. So I think I get a lot of native artists reaching out to me these days asking how they can get into augmented reality too, because they all want to tell their stories at their land sites. And I think this lets us do that without, disturbing our own sacred sites. We don't necessarily want to put a big art monument there. We don't necessarily want to put a big building there. We want people to hear these stories in a way that, we have oral traditions. We don't necessarily need to write everything down. Or we don't need to make monuments. So this lets us tell those stories and respect the land at the same time.
That's really fascinating. Do you have any upcoming projects using augmented reality in the future?
Yeah, I just got a new commission here in St. Paul at a place called Unchi Park, which is Grandmother Earth Park, and I'll be doing augmented reality there. It's along the same river as this is too, so they will be able, to come to both locations and experience different parts of our creation stories and, our connections to the land.
That's wonderful. Marlena Miles, thank you so much.
Yeah.
When we come back, we'll hear about an important alliance on the Columbia River. When she was growing up, Asia Dakota thought she wanted to be a doctor, and while she isn't a medical doctor today, she is in a position of taking care of the health of salmon. Recently, Dakota was named the executive director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. She's the first woman to lead this multi-tribal organization in its nearly 50-year history. Chris Adland, a reporter for Underscore and ICT, profiled Dakota recently, and he joins us now to tell us more about her work. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Leah. Happy to be back.
Great. Well, tell us about Asia Dakota.
So she is, I guess, first off, this organization, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, is, pretty influential and important in the Northwest and the Columbia River Basin, especially when it comes to, advocating for and working on behalf of the 4 Columbia River Treaty Tribes. And so Asia was chosen last month to lead this organization. She's a Yakama Nation tribal citizen, has spent her career in natural resources, and is the first woman to lead this organization.
And when you spoke to her, what really, I guess, struck you about maybe her goals for leading this organization?
Well, the one thing is she's coming, aboard, at a pretty pivotal time for, not just the organization, but kind of the basin. Of course, we have climate change, kind of wreaking havoc and changing things. They're seeing, salmon numbers coming up the Columbia, that pale in comparison to what, historically they had seen, last year, for example. Something like 1.3 million salmon came up the river, and that's compared to up to 20 million pre-contact. So there's that piece, and then there's other challenges that she'll have to face. Being kind of the future of hydropower and dams along the river, and others in the basin, and just being part of those discussions, and participating in these discussions that will include a huge, broad, diverse group of people with different stakes and interests and in the future of the river, and different opinions. She's got a lot on her plate, but people who I talked with and those who selected her have the utmost confidence in her, and know she's going to knock it out of the park.
I could imagine. And when you spoke to her, I'm really curious, sort of how she weighed being the first female. It's really quite mind-boggling sometimes to think that there's still not yet women in a lot of major positions. But did she talk at all about, that being a cornerstone of this job?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, she was, first of all, honored, and, definitely had considered and thought about the significance of that, and knew it was, a big deal and, a long time coming. At the same time, she also talked about how privileged and honored she felt to be getting this position kind of amid other, big historic, appointments in Indian country, being, Deb Haaland to lead the Interior Department, and, most recently Chuck Sams, who is a member of one of the Columbia River Treaty Tribes, to lead the National Park Service. So kind of coming, amid a couple different things that, she, felt, like I said, honored to be a part of that.
And what has been the reaction from tribal leaders around Indian country?
They're really excited, to have her, someone with her background. She's spent her career in tribal fisheries and resource management. She's worked for the organization for about 12 years. She knows her stuff, dedicated her career to this, and really feels strongly that she's the right person to be the voice of these 4 tribes or the organization when it comes to kind of determining or helping to shape the future of this river and this basin, which kind of looms large over the culture and everything in the Northwest.
That's a great segue into my next question, is really that a lot of the tribes in the Pacific Northwest have really tight relations to fish and to salmon specifically. Did she talk about how much culture plays a role in saving the salmon?
Sure. It's kind of central to, the organization's mission. As you mentioned, not just to the Columbia River Treaty Tribes, but kind of all over the Northwest, since time immemorial. People have been fishing for salmon and relying on it for, not just subsistence, but, it's become and always has been one of the most important aspects of culture, and shaped that, and, religious practices. And, a lot of the tribal nations and tribes, call themselves salmon people. So you can't kind of separate the two. And, of course, the salmon are in trouble right now. So, they're doing a number of things, and even just kind of going forward, even just, educating people and the youth about the importance of salmon and how it's vital to the culture, and trying to, get more Indigenous youth and tribal members to work, in this field. Not necessarily for the organization, but just in kind of natural resources and restoration and protection and treaty rights, through kind of salmon culture camps, and even getting, curriculum into schools, and just kind of really planting the seed.
Also important. Chris Adlin, thank you so much.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
New Yorkers are famous for thinking that Manhattan is the center of the universe, but to Lenape Indians, it is even more important. It is their home, the place their ancestors were driven from. Today, a group of Lenape culture bearers wants to reestablish a presence in Manhattan, in the heart of their ancestors' homeland, known as Lenapehoking.
If you look around Manhattan today, it's hard to find traces of the rich Lenape culture that thrived there before colonial contact.
The Lenape were indeed very capable of being fierce warriors, but they were really known among their neighboring tribes as Mahumsak, the grandfathers. They were considered to be the wise ones, and their elder leadership was often called upon to mediate peace. So that's how important and distinctive the Lenape were.
But they were pushed ever westward, first by the Dutch, who built a wall around their colony that became Wall Street, and then the British, and then the Americans. Today's Lenape descendants live primarily on 5 reservations in Ontario, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma, and are all but invisible in Manhattan, save for a couple of land acknowledgement plaques, 2 monuments to the fictitious sale of the island to the Dutch, and a drawing on the seal of the city. The leaders of the Lenape Center want to change that.
Lenape Center was founded in 2009 in response to what we felt and experienced and saw as our complete erasure from this land, our ancestral land.
Our first decade of existence in Lenape Center has been to focus on cultural things, programming, as opposed to having a building. But now is the time when we're thinking about having a place where people can come visit and come stay and actually see the homeland and experience the homeland.
Today, the Lenape Center leaders are embarked on a campaign to raise the money and secure the land for a cultural center on Manhattan. Their first choice for a location? The last wild stand of forest on the island in Inwood Hill Park on the very northern tip of Manhattan. A cultural center, these leaders say, would honor those that were forced away.
So here we are in the center, the heart of Manhattan. We're standing on this concrete among all these buildings. This is Lenapehoking. Our ancestors are still here.
In New York, this is Stuart Huntington, Indian Country Today.
Want to learn more about the Lenape Center and the effort to restore Indigenous culture in New York? You can check out the center online at lenapecenter.com. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, go to indiancountrytoday.com. I'm Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. Standing rock. This is Indian Country Today.